Plucky Perry. This is the story of two men who both claim to have reached the North Pole. The question is, which one of them got there first? Read on and see what you think. So here is the horrible geography tale of Robert E. Perry. As a lad, Robert was shy and lonely. But his favorite hobby was stuffing dead animals, so it's not surprising he didn't have any friends. Then, one day, he read a brilliant book about the Arctic that changed his life. Young Robert was hooked. He was determined to become an explorer, famous for reaching the North Pole first. Here's an earth-shattering fact for you. Norwegian Fridtjof Nansen knew all about the awful Arctic. One of the greatest polar explorers ever, he set off in 1893 to cross the Arctic Ocean on his ship, From, and drift towards the pole. From's special design meant it wouldn't be crushed if it got stuck in the drifting pack ice. The plan worked brilliantly. In March 1895, Nansen and a companion left the ship to ski to the North Pole. They went further north than anyone else, but had to stop short of the pole. Then things went from bad to worse. They were forced to spend a freezing winter in the Arctic, living off stewed polar bear. It wasn't until the following June that gutsy Nansen was finally rescued. And we see him eating his stewed polar bear. Perry joined the U.S. Navy, but luckily his bosses gave him plenty of time off for exploring. He made 9 trips to the Arctic in all, pushing further and further north. Twice he tried to reach the North Pole, but freezing weather forced him back. Parky Perry nearly starved to death, and he lost half of his toes from frostbite. His toes simply snapped off when he took off his socks. How horrible is that? Look at that. Oh my gosh, these socks feel heavy. But Perry was as hard as nails, and he wasn't about to give up. No way. Toes or no toes, he was going to put his best foot forward. In July 1908, Perry set off again for the Arctic. This would be his last chance to reach the North Pole. Would be third time lucky for Plucky Perry? Here's an earth-shattering fact again. The local Arctic people are called the Inuit. They've lived there for centuries and are experts at coping with the perishing polar cold. Perry reckoned, rightly so, his best chance of survival was to live like the locals. So he made friends with some Inuit and picked up loads of top survival tips, like learning to drive a dog sledge, building an igloo, and making cozy clothes from sealant polar bear skins. Think you could do any of these? You see him, a learner driver. Early in 1909, Perry and his party set up camp on icy Ellesmere Island off Greenland. For months, they busied themselves laying supplies on the route to the pole. Then Perry set off. The journey was perilous. The fragile ice beneath his feet threatened to crack at any time, plunging his sledges into the freezing sea. And once he had to wait 6 days for a stretch of water to freeze over. There you see his journey of where he was supposed to go and where he went. At last, on April 2nd, Perry was ready to fight for the final push to the pole. With him were 4 Inuit and his trusty traveling companion, Matthew Henson. For another 5 grueling days, the men marched grimly on. Luckily, they made good progress. The ice was hard and level, and the sledges slid smoothly along. Then, on April 6, 1909, came the moment Peary had been waiting for so long. Utterly exhausted, he reached the North Pole at last. Peary and his companions planted an American flag and posed for photos. Then it was time for the treacherous trek back to base. Incredibly, there were no slip-ups and it took them just 18 days. So it seemed plucky Peary had reached the North Pole first and earned his place in history. Or had he? While Peary was patting himself on the back, another intrepid American explorer was celebrating exactly the same thing. Cook's claim. As Peary's news broke, another polar pioneer, Dr. Frederick A. Cook, was celebrating his discovery of the North Pole at a dinner in his honor. Bursting with pride, Cook said he'd reached the pole on April 21st, 1908, a whole year before Peary. Cook kept his cool when he heard of Peary's achievement and wished his rival well. But Peary was livid. He called Cook a cheat and a liar and vowed to find out the truth. For months, the Polar Punch-Up was front-page news. Both men had kept diaries, which were checked and double-checked by the top Explorers Club. But who was telling the truth? Even the horrible geographers brought in to solve the matter once and for all couldn't agree. Here you see him fighting. Cook couldn't have got there first. Ask the Inuit who went with him. They said he stopped miles short of the pole and swore them to secrecy. Oh, and that his North Pole pissies weren't on the pole at all and somewhere else entirely. There is no way Peary reached the pole. His notes just don't add up. He claimed he traveled in a straight line, but you can't do that on drifting ice. Besides, Peary couldn't have got back from the pole as quickly as he claimed. No way. Puzzling, isn't it? So just who were you supposed to believe? Then, a sensational story appeared in the newspaper. October 1909, The Daily Globe, New York, USA. Cheating Cook in McKinley swindle. Crooked Cook. The world of exploration was rocked last night by a sensational revelation. Dr. Frederick A. Cook, celebrated conqueror of the North Pole, has been found guilty of cheating. 3 years ago, we reported that Dr. Cook led the first expedition to climb mighty Mount McKinley in Alaska, North America's highest peak. Overnight, his amazing trek turned him into a hero. But the Daily Globe can now reveal that Cook's fantastic feat was a fake. According to Edward Barrell, Cook's companion on that ill-fated trip, they never reached the top at all. In fact, the photos of the summit were actually taken on another peak. What's more, their diaries were doctored on Cook's orders. Today, Dr. Cook wasn't available for interviews. Rumor has it he's already left New York in disguise and is lying low in Europe. But rival explorer Commander Robert E. Peary told our reporter, well, that proves it. There is no way he could have reached the North Pole either. He's been lying about it all along. With his reputation in tatters, crestfallen Cook spent the rest of his life in disgrace. And the geographers ruled in Peary's favor, even though there wasn't any real proof to back up his claim. So the matter was settled, or so it seemed. Some people still reckon Peary was fibbing and hadn't been to the North Pole at all. Here's another earth-shattering fact. If you think Peary's claim was a lot of hot air, get this. In 1926, Italian Umberto Nobile flew over the North Pole in an airship, like a giant hot air balloon. His crew included famous co-pilot Roald Amundsen and Nobile's pet dog, Titina. This pampered pooch later became the first dog to see the North Pole twice. The trip was a huge success and Nobile was puffed up with pride. But on his next trip, 2 years later, tragedy struck when the airship crashed onto the ice. Nobile survived and was rescued, but 17 lives were lost. Meanwhile, at the other end of the Earth, a race for the South Pole was just about to start.